We are good to go. Okay. So I'd like to thanks for the invitation from the host of NFT Taipei, and then also thanks for Vitalik joining us from Mexico, right, from South American time zone. And I think this fireside chat we're gonna split into two parts. One is about Ethereum, the Ethereum at current stage and Ethereum in the future. One is about Taiwan, especially the future of Taiwan with digital democracy and how the Web3 community can help. And I think we're going to have a few questions. And this first starting question will be something I personally am also very interested in. We all know Ethereum went through the merge since earlier this year in 10th October, turned into a POS network. And now aim for the next upgrade, Shanghai upgrade, and the new roadmap also released. Most of today's audience are Ethereum fans and users, right, and believers in the decentralizations. How will you describe Ethereum's current stage of development and decentralization level to non-tech users? And how do you describe the past 7-year journal and the future 5 to 7 year journal of Ethereum? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think right now Ethereum is probably in its period of most rapid development, right? Like I actually think development of the protocol sped up in a lot of ways over the last maybe 3 or 4 years, just because a lot more people joined the ecosystem. We were able to actually work on things and finish things a lot more quickly, right? And that really started maybe with EAP 1559 in the summer of 2020, and then the launch of the Beacon chain, and now the merge that happened in September this year, right? So a lot of things are quickly changing in the Ethereum protocol, and it was always known since the beginning that the Ethereum protocol would change, right? Like it was even part of the discussion back in 2014 that the long-term goal is for Ethereum to move to proof of stake, that we're actively exploring what kind of proof of stake protocol it makes sense to move Ethereum to. And there are a lot of discussions, a lot of different ideas. And I think what's happened since then is those discussions and ideas turned into proposals, those proposals turned into code, and that code finally turned into a live network, right? But proof of stake is only the first step. So about a couple of months ago, I had published this document that, this base picture on Twitter, the roadmap that showed some of the other things that the Ethereum ecosystem was working on. And for those who have been following Ethereum, there wasn't really anything new there, right? It was more like my attempt to describe, what are the things that the ecosystem was pushing toward, right? So one of the merge was obviously a big one. Then one of the other big ones was the surge, which is about making Ethereum more scalable and making it more able to process many more transactions. There was the Verge, which is about making it easier to verify Ethereum blocks with things like Merkle trees and snarks. And that helps make the chain more decentralized. And there are a few smaller items as well, right? Like issues around cleaning up the protocol, solving MEV, and these kinds of things. And so there is this gap between what Ethereum looks like today and what an ideal Ethereum from the point of view of most people in the technical community looks like. But at the same time, it feels like the long-term vision is stabilizing, right? It feels like the amount of change in the long-term vision is already much less than there was, 2 years ago or 4 years ago, right? And so it feels like the roadmap is solidifying. It feels like there's a stronger feeling that people know what they're moving toward, and all of the things that are being done in the ecosystem are steps to move toward that. And so my prediction for how quickly the protocol is going to evolve, right, is that I expect some pretty significant changes, like EIP 4488 is one, ERC 4337 is one, a few Merkle trees are one, right? That are just needed to get things like scalability done and to try to make the protocol more decentralized for the long term. But in the short term, it just means it does mean a lot of coordination and it does mean a lot of work. In terms of decentralization, I think this is an interesting topic, right? Because from the point of view of an outsider, like it can be difficult to see, what Ethereum governance actually works like, and what actually is needed to get a change pushed through, and what is not, and those kinds of things. But I think in general, like there's two ways to get decentralization, right? One is to just have a bigger ecosystem and have a broader and more diverse group of stakeholders, and the other is immutability, right? So the first is basically, instead of having a very small group of people in charge of the protocol and making all the decisions, there's a much larger number of people involved, diverse groups of people involved. One of the things that we're trying to do now is intentionally getting not just core developers, but like applications as users, having more of a voice in the all core devs discussions. And then the other side, like immutability, is just saying like, we roughly know what the protocol is, and like there just should be a strong default that what it is, it stays that way, right? And it should be more difficult to change things than to keep things the same. And immutability is a difficult one because immutability is like, it's not always good, right? It's generally, for early stage projects, immutability is bad, right? Because for early stage projects, flexibility and being able to adapt is good. But for longer term things, and especially systems that are general purpose, where there's a lot of applications that are depending on them, when there's a lot of activity already happening in the ecosystem, where the benefit of changing things is smaller and the cost of changing things is higher, that's when immutability starts becoming more important. And so far, I think there's the amount of changes that really affects or even breaks existing applications has been very small, right? Like the merge has been a big change to Ethereum, but the merge, I don't think it even broke almost any Ethereum applications. Like maybe it broke like one or two small ones that like use the difficulty as a random number generator, for example. But although even there, like, we changed that difficulty, I think, over to the random opcode, and so they still kind of work, right? But I think, very few applications ended up like really breaking or even changing their functionality as a result of the merge, which I think is amazing given how big a change the merge was to Ethereum, right? So it's a combination of both of those things, but I think in general, like people are expecting, Ethereum 5 years or 10 years from now to be a much more kind of solid system, and probably a system that changes less than Ethereum does today, whereas Ethereum today still is a system in progress in like a very big way, right? Like one of the things I think I said at another event before is that like Bitcoin people think Bitcoin is 80% complete, Ethereum people think Ethereum is 40% complete. I think now maybe it's up to 60% complete, but it's still, it is still a system in progress in that way, right? And that's a transition that we will just have to deal with over the next 5 years.
Well, that's really long answer, and that's really a lot of information. It was really interesting to think about the immutability and decentralization. Let's talk about new technology and new terms. And there's so many new terms, kind of like, SBT, soulbound token, ZK, snarks, and, like all these like terminologies. You talk about ZK a lot, right? And I think I remember your word on the other blog, like ZK is a cool hammer in crypto to solve a lot of like problems. And you also mentioned SBT to, especially on anti-bot problem, on how to identify human problem. And this conference, this NFT Taipei conference, we're gonna have SBT. I don't know how it works, but it's really cool. So what's your thought on these problems? What is solving, like scaling, privacy, and the future of proof of human protocol? All these things.
Yeah.
What are these solving? Yeah.
So ZK snarks are very important, right? I think I've said somewhere else that I think ZK snarks over the next 10 or 20 years will be as important as blockchains. And like, I really do believe that, right? ZK snarks are an extremely powerful privacy technology, and they can be used to both fix problems in blockchain applications and even to make centralized systems more secure and provide better guarantees to their users, right? And so one of the ways that I explain this is that what a blockchain does is a blockchain gives you some like very powerful and very important properties like openness, open execution, censorship resistance, a guarantee that the system is following the rules that the developer says that it's following. But blockchains sacrifice two very important things: scalability and privacy. Now, what do ZK snarks give you? ZK snarks give you scalability and privacy, right? So ZK snarks are a very natural solution to probably the biggest two problems that basically any blockchain application has. And like how to use ZK snarks, especially for privacy, it depends a lot, like application by application, right? For scalability, it's easy because, or at least it's very hard for developers, but conceptually easy for us who get to just enjoy the results of the set developments, right? Like ZK EVMs. Basically, you just make a snark that just proves that a lot of EVM computation happened, and anyone can verify that instead of verifying an Ethereum block. And like this is how you have scalability, right? So instead of like everyone doing verification, everyone only verifies a little bit, and only one person does more computation. For privacy, it's much more application specific. So if anyone's interested, I'm on my blog, vitalik.ca. If you just like Control F for the word snark, I think the most recent piece probably talks about like how to use ZK snarks for privacy. And I give a couple of examples, but like, it really depends on which application you use. You have to, or you're building, you have to think, you have to be careful. But at the same time, privacy is very important, right? Like if you want to have a reputation system, privacy, that needs to be private. Like we don't want to be broadcasting all of our social relationships to the entire world. If you even want to have a cryptocurrency, in the long term, I think we will need to have privacy. If you want to, have some soulbound token system, like in the long term, we will need to have privacy, right? Like there are some things that people wanted to reveal, but there are lots of things that people don't want to reveal, and people should have that choice. And so, I think ZK snarks like this very natural technology for actually implementing these kinds of more complicated arrangements that give users much more control about what they reveal and what they don't reveal. And like I would encourage any developer building things now to build or building applications, especially, right? Like building anything with soulbound tokens or Pope or proof of humanity or like any of these systems. Like think about privacy from day one and figure out how you're going to use ZK snarks from day one.
That's cool. And you tweet a lot. I mean, not only write a blog a lot, you tweet a lot, and some of those tweets are even in Mandarin, right? You recently also tried out, I think, several decentralized social networks, and you tweet about how's the experience. What do you think about these social networks, meet Web3, meet crypto, and especially related to Twitter and Elon's action? The Elon law is charging dollars, right? And Elon is doing a lot of things. What's your thoughts, and what do you want to see in the decentralization social network that's not achievable by traditional ones? Yeah.
So one of the things that I've I think learned so far is, and one of the interesting things, by the way, is that I think this applies both to social networks and to network states, right? In case anyone's trying to make one of those happen, is that like you think that you're building a technology, you're not building a technology. You think that you're building a governance mechanism, you're not building a governance mechanism. The thing that you're building and selling that is like 5 times more important than both of those is the community, right? Like it is the community, and even the way that the community starts from the very beginning of the project that determines what kind of thing it is that you're creating and basically whether it's going to live or die. And in the case of social networks, I kind of feel like I've explored, Mastodon and Farcaster and Lens quite a bit so far, and that comes through very clearly, right? Like for me, one of the biggest reasons to use Farcaster is that one is it has a community that's big enough, and two, it has a community that is high quality. So both of those are important, right? Like you do need some raw scale, but I think Metcalfe's law, the n squared rule is wrong, right? Like I think it's more n log n than n squared. I think network effects are hugely important when you go from 0 to a little bit, but they're less important when you go from a little bit to a lot. And so you do have to get past that point at the beginning, but once you get past that point, then I think the more important discussion stops being about quantity of network effect and starts being about quality of network effect. And that's, I think that's something that's true with crypto communities as well, right? Like, I think if you ask people, why they're part of, either the, Ethereum community or even the Bitcoin community, or the Solana community instead of the others, a lot of the time their answer is not going to be, we want to be where the big things are. Their answer is we like I vibe with the people who are here and I don't vibe with the people who are over there, right? And those things matter a lot for anything that's any kind of social network. And I feel like Farcaster has been doing a fairly good job of this so far. Mastodon, I think, has been doing a good job in a different way. Like they're appealing to a definitely different kind of community than Farcaster is, right? Like there's a lot of very specific political values that I think a lot of Mastodon people really agree on, and there's a lot of particular communities discussing particular topics that are already on there. So basically, which ones of those succeed, I think, will depend on how good they are at attracting and retaining good communities and good people that other people want to be around and interact with. And I guess my prediction for Twitter is going to be the same, right? Like I think the world where Twitter fails is like a world where the crazy people get elevated and everyone else starts quietly moving somewhere else. And the world where Twitter succeeds is the world where that doesn't happen, right? So I think it's what's going to happen there over the next few months, I think, is going to decide a lot. And I think the community dynamics are definitely going to matter more than the technology.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, you mentioned network state. That's really interesting. And
I mean, they are social networks.
Let's talk about
right?
Taiwan. Yeah, I mean, network state are social networks, and eventually we are ending in network state. Let's talk about Taiwan. Actually, a lot of our audience don't know that actually Ethereum Foundation have several researchers and developers from Taiwan, or they still live in Taiwan, right? And I personally remember meeting some of them. I think 4 or 5 guys, 3 or 4 guys. They're really cool folks, and they also speak Mandarin. So here's a question about Taiwan. One is about the blog you mentioned, the safe CEX, the safe sex, right? On recent FTX crash, a lot of Taiwanese retail investors got hurt a lot, and we see a statement from the government, from regulator, statement from DAOs trying to fix the problem a little bit. But can we have really safe DEX, or we do need eventually a better DEX? And then there seems a lot of problem in between. Like we may need new different wallet, right? You talk a lot about ERC 4337, the account abstraction, the smart contract wallet, and the different kind of new wallet. That seems to be also necessary, especially for retail investors in Taiwan that got hit, right? And how they gonna minimize their effort to learn, but also try to be safe.
Yeah. So I think the things that are going to succeed in the crypto space are things that are both useful and that actually stay true to the values of of crypto, right? And I think the second part is a part that a lot of people forget, right? And like there's even a lot of people who say and even believe things like, oh, in reality, centralization is more efficient and centralization is better. And the only reason why we need to be decentralized is because we need to evade the regulators, right? And like, if regulators didn't exist, then we would just have a happy land and everything would be centralized and efficient. And I think the FTX situation kind of reveals the limits of that worldview, right? And the reason, like the limit that it reveals is that I think some kind of social technology to deal with the problem and the possibility of people doing bad stuff is necessary, right? And to some extent, it's like, you have to either properly embrace the kind of, what we might call the fiat approach, or properly embrace the crypto approach, right? Like the problem with the centralized exchange ecosystem, and obviously, FTX in particular, is that it tries to use crypto as basically a way to be regulated less, but without actually taking into account the parts of crypto that are about things like protecting users and ensuring that systems are open and transparent so that they don't cheat people, right? Like FTX failed and blew up and burned many billions of dollars of people's money. Uniswap has been running perfectly for 4 years. MakerDAO has been running quite well for 4 years. On the one hand, Luna blew up in April, but after the crypto prices dropped about I think 30 or 40%, but MakerDAO has several times, I think even at least once, has survived the crypto prices dropping by more than 50% in one day. And this was, I believe, even before when USDC started becoming a really big source of collateral on it, right? So there is this path that you can take where, if you actually do take the ideas behind crypto seriously and you actually, properly think through, this idea that you have cryptographic tools, and these cryptographic tools can be used to protect users. They can be used to make systems that are credibly neutral. They can be used to make systems that are safer in a lot of ways. And projects that follow those principles properly, I think, are the projects that have been successful so far, right? But at the same time, I think it's important to remember that, but it's also important to remember the issues and the needs of practicality, right? So I visited Latin America a bunch over the last year and a half, and one of the things that you notice about Latin America here is that huge numbers of people use cryptocurrency, but a lot of the people, even most of the people who use cryptocurrency for some very pragmatic need, they just need an easy way to get money in from the United States or something like this. They have a Binance account, and when they transfer money to each other, they transfer their money through Binance accounts, because Binance to Binance transfers are instant, right? And if they have a Binance account, they don't need to worry as much about losing their wallet and what happens if they forget their seed or if their phone gets stolen, because Binance can do recovery, right? And so I think the decentralized solutions, they do have to step it up in terms of usability, right? And there's many different aspects to usability, right? So there's transaction fees, which were very high a year ago. They're a bit lower because of market conditions, but to make them really low, we have to use layer 2 protocols and rollups. There is transaction inclusion speed, the number of seconds you wait between clicking send and getting one confirmation. And that has actually improved a lot since the merge, right? If you, I actually, use the Ethereum chain a lot, right? And I remember 3 years sending a transaction and waiting for it to get included was painful. Today, it's just almost instant. You just send, wait 5 seconds, and it's usually already in one block, right? So, and then the other side of this is the security side, right? How do we make something that's safe enough for a person who is not willing to, go through all of the complicated steps of making something like a seed phrase or, a hardware wallet safe, right? Like, how do you make something that's safe even if someone's house burns down, even if someone, accidentally loses their suitcase when they're traveling or anything like this? And social recovery wallets are, I think, my favorite solution for this, but I think, there's room for innovation and there's room for a lot of different, ideas and experiments to happen, right? So, like, what I want to see out of the crypto space in general is for kind of to, both stay true to its original values and to, properly understand and appreciate practicality and like what, people's, really pragmatic uses for the space are. And try to find a way to get both at the same time. I think, for Taiwan in particular, it's like different countries are in different situations, and it's important to kind of understand that and keep that into account, right? So, like for example, Argentina is in the middle of a ongoing, very long-term and serious, currency crisis. Venezuela just had hyperinflation. In Iran, there's all of the government authoritarianism, and there's huge numbers of people that just really actively need to, literally evade their governments and not get caught. Taiwan is, both, wealthier and more stable in the short term than a lot of those places, right? And so, but at the same time, there are lots of people doing international business. There are still, I think, even in a stable society, a lot of needs to try to make, governance more open and transparent, to make things like social networks better. Like, I don't think anyone has, figured out how to actually make a social network that, works really well and in a way that makes everyone happy, to organize internationally, participate in projects with people on the other side of the world, even like just have alternative forms of savings as a backup, right? So people have, still do have a lot of needs, and like it's probably important to start like figuring out, what are the needs that are like genuine enough that people can, understand and wrap their heads around and actually build towards. And at the same time, there's a lot of really amazing talent, and a lot of people who are just really excited to learn, and people who understand and have quickly brushed up their understanding of things like zero knowledge proofs. So I'm excited to see what kinds of things the Ethereum and the crypto community in Taiwan end up developing.
Yeah, that's great. You mentioned traveling in Latin America, and also mentioned virtually traveling in our state, and you traveled several times in Taiwan. What's your feeling and suggestion on Taiwan its approach to digital democracy, especially when we see the great impact from Western community on the Ukraine? We see donations from all over the world, from everyone to the Ukraine about their people and their DAO, right? And what do you think the young people could do, especially people in Taiwan, could do to change Taiwan? Yeah. That's a tough question.
Yeah, it is. I mean, one thing that I think is always valuable is to just like do experiments that you think are interesting, right? So, if you identify some particular place that you think could benefit from a quadratic funding round, then like try to make a quadratic funding round happen, right? If anyone is interested in participating in some of these, crypto-enabled, Ethereum-based social networks, like they're there. You can use them, and you can start participating and enjoying in a lot of them even today. If you see some particular application that would benefit from people being able to zero knowledge prove like some aspect of their reputation, then that's something that you can start doing already, right? Like soulbound tokens, I think people don't appreciate the extent to which they're, like, even today, they're not theoretical, they're practical, right? Like Pope, the proof of attendance protocol, it has existed for, years now. I mean, I should probably specify, popes are, they're not technically soulbound because you can transfer them, right? But like the nice thing about blockchains is that, there's a chain and you can just check whether or not a token has been transferred before, right? And so if you want to only see popes that have not been transferred, you can actually just go and do that. So there are popes for a lot of different things. Like I think there's like even websites where you can go to where you can just like see all of the popes that I have, for example, like Vitalik.eth. I think you can probably find that online and just find, the list of hundreds of them that I have. There's, things like Proof of Humanity, things like Kleros, and like these already exist and they can just be used as ingredients. And so, try to find some application that you think is interesting and like try to build it and try to actually make it happen. And if it succeeds, then find a way to keep increasing the scale and make it bigger and more interesting over time.
Yeah. So this is my last question, and we're gonna take 3 questions from the audience after that. This one, this is also like very interesting. What's your words to those young developer, entrepreneur, like builders who want to join the Ethereum ecosystem or specifically join the Ethereum Foundation to work on something, and their parents will be like, oh, you work in Ethereum Foundation, what is it? And what's your words to them? And how to let them don't join the big tech? Yeah.
So I think one important part of the answer to that is kind of how to join, in the sense of like how to get into both the community. So I think the answer there does start with the community, right? So you can start by going through and reading all of the things that Ethereum researchers have said. You can go read ETH Research, you can go read Ethereum Magicians, and just like start commenting, right? And a lot of our best developers that we ended up hiring were people where we basically, we called them up after we realized that, like, hey, there's this person who just consistently makes very interesting comments, and he might have really interesting things to say and even be able to help much more, right? So that is like one of the ways to do that. Another is, a lot of different projects within the ecosystem. There's a lot of room for people to even start their own projects, right? Like you can just go through the list of things that people have talked about and just start building one, right? Like one example of this is the list of projects that I mentioned on my blog post, right? Like some ways to use ZK snarks for privacy is the title of the post. And there's just examples there, and you can go and take one of those examples and just build it and turn it into something, right? And the time commitment is fairly low. You can just make it be a part-time hobby and just start working on it. And eventually that's if people see it and if it succeeds, then you can like at any time just like choose to hop over and start doing it full time, right? Like the way that I started and I joined the space is I started off as a part-time writer for Bitcoin Magazine, and over time I started doing more and more, started getting into other projects, and I then made the decision to drop out of university and become a full-time participant in this space. Once I realized that, like, hey, there is enough work and enough stuff here for me to actually, dedicate my full time to, right? So, start small, start with side projects, start with hobbies, start with learning, and I think there's lots of routes by which that could turn into being a full-time contributor and a member of the space.
All right, let's wait and see how many job or how many cool kids can grow up and then be like the next Vitalik and start from small and now big. We're gonna take 3 questions from the audience.
Mhm.